This video is a discussion of the arguments made in YouTuber Neryl's review of Hollow Knight. While I disagree with a lot of Neryl's points about the game, I encourage you to treat him with respect in the comments. It's easy to mock someone you disagree with. It's a lot harder to contend with their arguments. I've left the link to the original video in the description. Please enjoy.
The first game in the list is one of the most acclaimed indie games ever made. I've even seen praise placing it above Super Metroid as the best game in the genre. Can Hollow Knight live up to that hype? No.
Neryl starts his review by praising the game for its visuals, sound design, and tight controls. While I do truly appreciate his ability to provide a nuanced view of the game, in the interest of time I've decided to skip some of his less contentious points.
And even with every ability, it can take a while to get where you need to because the map is absolutely massive. Massive and
Okay, let's start here. Neryl apparently finds Hellenist massive and boring. Now, massive, we can agree on that, but boring? I assume he's referring to a lack of interesting gameplay, as the background shows him walking across the bridge in Ancient Basin, as well as riding the elevator down from the Watcher's Spire. But are those actually good examples of the game being boring? The bridge in Ancient Basin is supposed to make you question why such a magnificent construction leads to nothing but the corpse of an old guard. Where did the White Palace go? And if you find it boring, you could just use your Crystal Dash to quickly traverse it. You do have it at this point in the game. The elevator ride up to Lurien the Watcher serves a similar cinematic purpose and also helps to pace the game after a very intense fight against the Watcher Knights. And again, if you find the ride back down boring, you could just jump down. The game isn't forcing you to ride the elevator. Now, this is me making an assumption about how Neryl feels about the game, and I am psychoanalyzing you a little bit here, buddy, so just bear with me if I'm totally off. But there's a common trend I've seen in people who do not enjoy playing Hollow Knight. And it is this: parts of the game that focus more on the atmosphere than on the gameplay will drag the game up for those who already feel immersed and down for those who don't. So while a moment like the walk across the palace grounds might feel cinematic to some, to others it's just a frustrating reminder that the game still isn't over yet. If you've managed to engage yourself in the atmosphere, you'll likely enjoy these moments. If not, you'll find them boring. And so tell me, what's the game supposed to do about that? Except, maybe letting the players skip the area, which it generally does. Is it just not supposed to have any cinematic moments? I don't understand the critique.
the dark blue-gray mood in the first area is the same blue-gray mood as the middle and end areas.
Ah, come on, those weren't the middle and end areas. Those were 2 clips of Crossroads, and then a clip of a section of Kingdom's Edge, which admittedly does look a little bit dull. But you can't just show 2 clips of Crossroads and call it the first and middle areas.
It rarely evolves or shows you anything different. What you're seeing here is about as much as the tone shifts, and it's basically the same thing, but purple now.
It's purple now? It's purple now!
If the developers had only used the first area's tile set and song for the whole thing, it wouldn't have made that much of a difference in most areas. And being one of the longest and most expansive examples of the genre, Hollow Knight desperately needs more variety than this.
I want to give a fair interpretation of Neryl's argument here. Having played some of the new Silksong, and please, no spoilers in the comments, I do actually understand the argument that some areas in Hollow Knight look perhaps a bit too similar, at least in certain places. However, saying that the developers could have just used the tile set and music of the Crossroads for the entire thing and it wouldn't have made much of a difference is a radical argument. Look at Green Path compared to the Hive, Ancient Basin compared to Fog Canyon, in Crystal Peak and City of Tears. These are all areas with distinct color schemes, enemies, tile sets, and definitely music. There's just no sense in calling these clones of the Crossroads.
The game also blows it when it comes to power-ups, because the majority of secrets in the world don't power you up. One of the key drivers of a Metroid game's momentum is the steady gain in strength you get from every little missile tank or beam upgrade. Most of the secret passages in Hollow Knight lead to a power refill, an egg, an emblem, or a journal entry. Even up to the last moments of the game, I still didn't know what half of these items even did and had to search it to find out that you just hawk them for money. The only secret I consistently enjoyed was finding members of the Grub family, and even that just mostly leads to money. Super Metroid delivered upgrades with just the right pacing to keep you satisfied without overpowering you. You really have to enjoy the precious few power-ups in Hollow Knight that actually do something, because it could be hours before you see the next one.
Okay, so the argument is basically Hollow Knight doesn't have enough cool power-ups. Now, put aside the fact that Hollow Knight has tons of collectibles, and not just the banal ones exclusively mentioned in the video, but spells, abilities, items, nail upgrades, charm notches, soul vessels, mask fragments, nail arts, and charms. The real issue I have with this criticism is that it seems to completely ignore the issue of game balance. What would happen if there were, say, 3 times as many spells, spell upgrades, and nail upgrades? Well, you would either make the game way too easy, or you'd have to force the player to find these upgrades before progressing. That makes the game less open, and it makes it more punishing for you to miss a specific item in a specific spot. A complaint that Nerol raises himself not a minute later. I talk more about the challenges of progression in this video, which I'll link below. But as any video game reviewer should know, putting more upgrades into a game can very easily throw off the balance. It's rarely just as simple as give the player more cool stuff.
Perk-style enhancements are the most common upgrades, and you're severely limited to equipping just a few at a time, meaning you can't really enjoy the powerful ones without getting rid of everything else.
You're gonna have to pardon me for being so blunt, but this is yet another argument that appears to stem from a lack of understanding about one of Hollow Knight's fundamental systems. Here's the argument that I heard. There are too few charm notches for the player to enjoy all of the cool charms. And here's the very natural response to that. If you could just put on as many charms as you wanted, the charm system would no longer function as a customization system. It would just be a series of permanent upgrades. There would be no customization left. Now, if the argument is just, I wish the game handed out a few more notches by the end, I think that's way less outrageous. Exactly how many notches you should be able to find is certainly up for discussion, but this generalized annoyance that you can't equip every charm you find displays a shallow understanding of what makes the charm system such a great vessel for player creativity. Well, at least in theory. Certainly the system could benefit from a few rebalances.
Buying more slots requires that you found one specific shop that's easily missable, which is pretty much the story for many other critical systems in the game. The developers don't really care what you find and what you don't, so obliviously passing one room in this massive map can put you at a major disadvantage the entire game.
Once again, I'd like to steelman Neryl's point here. Hollow Knight certainly does have some silly item placements that are way too easy to miss. Neryl even shows a good example of this, that being the simple key found in the Ancient Basin. Another classic is the Love Key. Generally, the problem with these upgrades is that they're found in areas that you have not explored yet, but which the map will make it look like you have. Possibly the simplest and most helpful fix would just be to make the room not be filled in on the map before you have actually had the chance to explore the part containing the item. This is, after all, how the game generally communicates to you that there's more to explore on the map, and it's overall a very underrated system for guiding the player. You could also consider adding a late game upgrade or a charm that allows you to track the locations of uncollected loot, something I've previously suggested. With that said, why Neryl is mentioning Salubra's shop as an example of this is really quite beyond me. If you take the time to explore even just semi-carefully, you'll certainly notice this mysterious hut with strange sounds coming from it and be intrigued enough to go inside. It's a very strange example.
The world is challenging enough that just getting around requires the kind of dexterity that Metroid games usually reserve for getting the toughest secret items.
Although I haven't had the pleasure of trying out any of the Metroid games, let me just say this to every person out there who's so deeply in love with the Metroid series as to never allowing their precious franchise to be topped by a game like Hollow Knight. The reason that Hollow Knight can have engaging platforming be a part of its world is because it has some of the best 2D movement in all of gaming. And judging from gameplay of Super Metroid, one might hardly say the same about that game. Now, I really don't mean to be rude to any Metroid fans. I just find it slightly suspicious that both Neryl and JLo, who also gave a negative review of Hollow Knight, which I made a video on, keep referencing Super Metroid as the apex of Metroidvanias. You have to at least pretend to be impartial here, boys. You're not a serious critic if you can't allow your favorite game to be topped.
There are tons of optional bosses in the game that are tough as nails, some taking dozens of attempts to defeat, and in most cases I wouldn't have bothered had I known they were optional and how inconsequential it would be.
he says as he defeats the boss, which will lead him to the game's true ending. Besides, why wouldn't you bother? Do you not even find the bosses fun? Or have you just definitively determined that the game isn't worth playing and want it to be over as soon as possible?
And that's another issue I have with the game. It's too open for its own good. Everyone hates extreme linearity, but as anyone who has played a lot of Metroid ROM hacks can tell you, going in the polar opposite direction doesn't work either. Developers have to balance the map between being linear enough to keep a sense of purpose and momentum, while being open enough that the player feels as if they're able to make choices.
I really do not understand the argument made with reference to a Metroidvania that the map is too open for its own good. Now, at times during the very end of the game, and in a few other cases, such as those mentioned earlier, I will agree that Hollow Knight fails to guide the player to the stuff they're missing. But to say that Hollow Knight's map is generally too open? People who love Hollow Knight wish the game were more open, and people who'd like it to be over wish it were less so.
At one point I took on this side boss, apparently much earlier than I should have been, but still managed to beat it. I explored the new area that opened up expecting that I might find some kind of power-up for the effort, only to be dropped into Deep Nest, one of the most dangerous areas of the game, which also happens to be hard to see in if you don't have a lantern yet, which I did not. After dying in a few difficult-to-reach spots and losing all my money, I gave up on exploring it and just tried to find the way back out, which wasted at least half an hour. Allowing players to enter areas they aren't prepared for is one thing. Trapping them in areas they aren't prepared for is basically punishing the player for exploring and being curious, which is one of the worst things a Metroidvania can do.
At the time of writing this script, the top comment on Neryl's video reads as follows. It's interesting how Joseph Anderson was dropped into a similar situation to your Deep Nest romp and praised it as one of the highlights of his playthrough. And I think that is exactly the point. Joseph Anderson, who has made 2 stellar videos on Hollow Knight, talks about his experience falling into Deep Nest early on and having to struggle his way out of this nasty claustrophobic crypt without any handholding. He loved it, and I think that's because he got himself immersed into the game, while Neryl instead dies 2 unfortunate consecutive deaths, loses all his geo, and in my bold estimation, develops a bit of a gripe for the game. Now, I really do understand why losing all of your geo can feel unfair. It happened to me on my first playthrough too, and I certainly felt that way. But whether you give the game a second chance to immerse you, or you just sort of give up, that's up to you, man. And I should say this, I've heard so many stories from people who didn't initially click with Hollow Knight, came back to the game, and now absolutely love it. You have to give Hollow Knight a proper second chance. If you don't, you're just gonna end up spending every moment wishing it were over sooner.
It was so dull that I stopped playing it near the end and only went back to finish it now, years later for this video. And the main satisfaction I got was the knowledge that I don't have to play it again. I'm not saying Hollow Knight is bad. It's still one of the most impressive indie games ever made, and the developers have a lot to be proud of. I can admire it, but I can't enjoy playing it. It's big, beautiful, boring, and kind of shitty, just a little bit.
Now, I didn't actually get to talk about every single point that Neryl makes, because his script is very concise and he manages to fit a lot of different arguments into his review. So if you want to listen to the whole thing, you should certainly go watch his original video. Even if I disagree with many of Neryl's points, he is a very sophisticated analyst, and I really appreciate that he never resorts to playing tricks on the viewer. He genuinely comes across as an honest fellow. Go watch his video, show him some love, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. That's enough from me. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.